And according to the Constitutional Court, though.
He took the money. It was a terrible situation, because what the court held is that the office of the NPA should be free of all interference, without fear or favor, without any influence. Do your job and put people who break the law behind bars. That's what they should be doing.
So when does the president actually decide that, okay, I'm going to get rid of someone, but the only way I can get rid of him is to give him all this money? And how is the president allowed to do that without following proper process? Or is there any proper process for him to follow on this?
Absolutely, there's a proper process, and that's precisely what happened here. Proper process was not followed, and that's why we have declarations of invalidity. The statute prescribes, if you are going to vacate your office before the elapse of the stipulated time period, there are reasons for doing so. If you're going to do so because of ill health, there's a methodology to compute how much you are entitled to. If you're going to leave for another reason, so too, there's a methodology how to calculate your pension. The whole idea is to not allow subjectivity to come in at the hands of, for instance, the president, but that there's a framework within which to compute how much you're entitled to.
If you look at the past couple of things that we listed before this interview, we know that Brian Molefe got 30 million. He was told to pay back 11 million. Nxasana is now told to pay back 10 million. They've been gone for years in the instance of Nxasana. Where does he get the money from if he spent it? Because he said he had no job. He needed the money.
Thus far, he's adopted an honorable approach. He, as I understand and I read it, he's tended to return the money. What we had the court doing is a very interesting thing. You had a majority judgment and you had a minority judgment. The majority judgment said it is time to restore the faith. We've got a good judiciary. It's time to restore the faith in the prosecutorial authority. We've seen the faith being restored in law enforcement with the removal of Nxasana and the installation of General Ledwaba. We've now got the opportunity to restore the faith and credibility of the prosecutorial authority. So the majority said, whilst ordinarily what ought to happen is that Nxasana should return to his post, we, as the majority, believe that it would be just and equitable not to delay the recovery of this institution any further, because what they could do, as the minority judgment said, is restore him to his position and then allow the president to invoke the mechanism through parliament to remove him. The majority said, why do that? Why prolong the stability that's required? So we are engaging in conduct that we're entitled to, namely, it's just and equitable to remove him immediately from his office and to instruct the president to appoint a new appointee within 90 days.
Yeah. Well, what about the consequences for the former president? Are there any? Because the Constitutional Court found that he abused his powers. His decision was unconstitutional and invalid. It sounds like a pretty damning thing to say. What are the consequences for him?
The law is supreme. Ultimately, you have to account for your actions before a court of law. And no matter how much you may not wish to do so, and how much you may invoke dilatory mechanisms, ultimately there must come a time where evidence is presented before a court and that you're held accountable before the law.
So he can be taken to court and challenged on this ultimately?
The former president, as we're all aware, is facing the prospect of coming to court one day, being called upon to stand in a witness box and to account for his actions. Only then will we be able to see the evidence that is presented and how the court applies the law in the light of the evidence that is presented.